Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a collective book review. I'm going to show you some of the books that I've been reading over the last 2 months, some of my favourites. So let's jump in because it's probably going to be quite a long video. So grab a nice drink and a snack and let's jump in. So I'm going to start with the nostalgic, more children, preteen books. I've really been enjoying reading books that are based on TV shows that I watched as a kid, and if you saw my nostalgic book haul video, I'll throw it up in a card if you haven't, but I would have shown you some of these books that I purchased on like Vinted and eBay. So things like Lizzie McGuire, Zoe 101, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all of that good stuff. So let me show you some of my favourites that I've read over the last couple of months. So the first one, and sort of I guess what sort of spurred me into rereading a lot of these childhood classics, or at least classics for me, is probably the Lizzie McGuire books. I was a big fan of Lizzie McGuire back in the day, and these books are direct copies from specific TV episodes. There are some that are more mystery based, that are completely new stories, but these ones reflect direct episodes. So this is New Kid in School, and it's split into 2 parts to reflect 2 different episodes. The first one being when Matt accidentally gets on the school bus and turns up at Lizzie's school, and then the second part being the episode where they do sort of the husband and wife scenario where they have to do sort of a test and work together. These were 2 very sort of standout episodes, I feel, back in the day. It included pretty much all of the characters that you would find within Lizzie McGuire, and yeah, I just don't think you can go wrong with these books. They're really easy to fly through. I can read it like one in an evening. Pumps up your book goal for the year, but also you don't have to think too hard about it, and it's really nostalgic. And then the next one I have is Zoe 101 Beach Party. Again, similar setup, 2 parts to it, reflecting 2 episodes of the show. The first one being when Zoe creates her very famous backpacks at school. I really always enjoyed that episode, so but it was cool to revisit that. And then the second part is when they end up trying to go to Mystic Beach after their exams, but they fall asleep and end up at the wrong beach. So again, full of nostalgic elements. It is just the same as the TV shows, and with these I like to read them and then go and to like Paramount or Disney Plus and watch the corresponding episodes to sort of round out my experience of rereading them. Next I have Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and this probably alongside Lizzie McGuire sort of started it all for me really. So this is number 7, All You Need Is a Love Spell. I've tried to read them in chronological order. I have a lot to get through. There's probably about between 30 to 40 books, so I've got a long way to go, but this is one of the more standout ones for me, alongside sort of the first book. So this is about a sort of foreign exchange student that comes to Sabrina's school, and everyone's like completely enthralled with him, like caught the love bug, so to speak, with him, and she just can't see past him. She bumped into him at the cinema and not all was quite as it seems, and she thinks there might be something, you know, magical about him. So yeah, it kept me, the plot line kept me hooked, and when the ending was revealed I was like, how did I not realise that before? Like, that's so obvious. But my little anxious, stress-ridden brain fully like got on board with this story. So yeah, I enjoyed reading that, and these books are all pretty much 4 or 5-star books, so I'm not going to keep repeating myself regarding that. And then I have read 2 of the Saved by the Bell books. These are pretty hard to find, but you can find a couple on sort of eBay and Vinted. So the first one I read was Zack Strikes Back, and in this one Kelly is sort of falling head over heels with this surfer dude that attends their school, and Zack obviously wants to try and get Kelly back, but his plans don't go quite the way that he expected, and she's not obviously caught on and falling back in love with Zack. She is full on with this surfer dude. So that's sort of one aspect of the book, and then you also have a storyline of Slater and Jesse, and Jessie is introducing Slater to her dad for the first time, and he is not a fan of AC, and so it sort of follows that as well. And the second book I read was Zach's Last Scam, and in this one Zach is kind of now a new local celebrity. He's going on this like TV show, and he has this very glamorous co-star who he has to pretend to be in love with, and obviously Kelly is not so approving of this and wondering, is this real love or is this just fake for the TV? And so Zach is juggling his newfound career and sort of grown-up aspects of this show with obviously balancing Kelly and trying to keep her sweet. So that was one side of the story, and then the other follows this time Lisa. She has lost her diary at school, and she actually gets Screech to help her try and track it down, because if she doesn't, some of her biggest secrets are going to get out. And with both of these books, they probably took me a little bit longer than those other sort of children's books. These feel sort of more preteen, I guess. But the stories feel really flushed out. They're complete new stories. As far as I'm aware, I don't recall anything like this. You may have sort of slight similarities in storylines, but for the book itself, they are new stories, as far as I'm aware. And the characters just felt really true to the show. The humour came across. I really enjoyed these, so I've got a few more to work my way through. So now I will move on to more fiction adult books. The first one I have to show you is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prause. This is a second in the series. She wrote The Maid, which I did a review on in one video or another, and really enjoyed that one, so I knew this was a no-brainer to pick up. And yeah, it was just as good as the first in my opinion. In the first book, we follow Molly, who is a maid in this lovely hotel. She lives with her grandmother. We sort of realise that maybe she's on the autistic spectrum. She doesn't quite fit in with everyone. You feel like people are sort of taking advantage of her. Whereas in the second book, we still follow her as a maid. She's now head maid of the hotel. And you feel like you really get to see her growing in character. You feel like she now knows herself better. She knows what her strengths are, and in this one she is trying to help solve another murder in the hotel of a mystery writer that had come to try and do a talk at the hotel, and he ends up being found dead. And Molly tries to help out the detective. The detective almost asks her for help, and yeah, you feel like in this book you see her character really grow and she's not taking no nonsense for it. Next book I have to show you is They Both Die at the End. This is written by Adam Silvera. You may recognise it more for its American cover, which is sort of a blue New York skyline, which is sort of how I think first came across it. But I actually got this from a friend. She was getting rid of some books, and this just sounded really interesting. So this is more probably YA, I would say, more on the dystopian side, which I used to love dystopian back in my teenage days, so I love picking it up every now and again. But this book follows two young boys, Mateo and Rufus, and they get the call from Deathcast to say that they are going to die within the next 24 hours. They don't tell them how they're going to die, they don't tell them when within that 24 hours. They can only tell them that they will die at some point. And yeah, it's a really unique concept, and these two boys end up finding each other and coming together, spending their last, what they call their end day together, and yeah, discovering each other, themselves, and you know, spending out their last day. And it makes you think, you know, if you knew how you were going to die, what would you do for your last day? And so it's interesting to see how they go about it, whether they choose experiences or whether they choose going to see family. And obviously, as the title says, they both die in the end, so that's not so much a spoiler. And I think because of that, I think for me, maybe I didn't get quite as attached to the characters. You know, I'm not really one for crying or getting really emotionally attached to characters. It has to be a really great plot line. I'll talk about that in a bit, for me to get really emotional at a book. So it's one of those things, you're either going to like the concept or you're not, purely because you know how it's going to end. I mean, you do and you don't, because you don't know how they're going to die. that is still the plot twist at the end, but you do know that they are going to die. So I think there are a couple other books, especially there is a prequel in this series. I'm not sure if I will pick any of the others up, to be honest. I feel like this is so unique that yes, although I'd like to read more about this world and see other people's experiences, it's that thing of how many times can we repeat the same story, if you see what I mean. That being said, and some of the points I've touched on there, I then quite recently read Before We Say Goodbye. I will not pronounce the author's name because I do not want to spoil it, but that is his name down there. And it's this I believe is the 4th book in a Japanese series. I actually have the first 3 here. The 5th one is out. I always like to wait for them in paperback now, but just because I've got the rest in paperback, so I like to keep it nice and continuous. But there is, I think, a 6th and final book that is out in Japanese, but it's not yet been translated, I've got a feeling. And I just love the look of these books. Anyway, this is the 4th in the series. The first book was Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and it's about a little coffee shop in Japan where residents of the city or the country can go and sit in a chair and go back in time and meet people that they once met and were with in the cafe. There are numerous rules about this cafe. For example, they only get as long in this seat with their loved one in the past for as long as their coffee stays warm. They must drink their coffee before it gets cold. If they don't, they become the resident ghost that sits there and sort of looks after the table. Another thing is they cannot change the past or the present. No matter what happens within that time frame, it will never change the future. So, for example, if they were going to go back in time to try and stop someone from then going to this place and then getting into an accident, they could tell them about it, but at the end of the day, something would still happen that that person would get into that accident, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, it's basically a little bit of time travel for someone to go back and see a relation and for whatever reason get a bit of closure. So each book has 4 different stories. At the front they have a little sort of diagram which summarises all of the characters. Some of them throughout the series interweave with each other, so they might just be referenced, and sometimes the stories themselves within the book also can sometimes link between each other, like that person was someone's teacher, but in this other story that is someone's husband, if you see what I mean. So yeah, in this book we had 4 different stories, and the one that most stood out to me was, I think it was the second one, and this woman has recently lost her dog, and she is beside herself with grief and guilt because towards the end of his life they knew he was getting old and was probably going to pass away. She wanted to stay up every night to be with him and so he wouldn't feel alone, and one night she ended up falling asleep, and that was when he passed away. And so she goes back in time to see her husband, and her husband brings the dog along, and she's like telling him about this is what's going to happen in the future. And just what her husband told back to her, I was sobbing. And like I said earlier, I do not cry at books. Like, I can probably count on my hands the amount of times I've cried at a book and it doesn't even feel the full hand. This, I think it's because it was a dog, and actually, I mean, I have Winnie here. Say hi. I just like sobbed and sobbed with this story in particular. And these books really normally only are sort of aside from the first one, they are quite repetitive. The story concept is the same each time, and so lately I've only probably been giving them 3 or 4 stars, but because of that one individual story, 5 stars. I could not give it that because it broke my little pet owner heart. So yeah, just a trigger warning for this one if you are a dog lover. The next book I have to share with you is Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. Yes, I know, I'm a big Agatha Christie fan, and it's only taken until now for me to read this book. For some reason, I think just because of the actual like country and the location in the book, that's probably why I've not picked it up, because usually I go for the cozy, cold locations. I go for, you know, the murder mystery set on an island or a train or a snowy top mountain. So this was a little bit different from what I would usually pick up for murder mysteries, but because I knew it's one of Agatha's most infamous books and now films, so it was about time for me to read this. And I've been trying to push myself to read books on my TBR shelf down here that have been sat there for quite a while, and this being one of them. So yes, needless to say, I really enjoyed it. With Agatha's books, and especially some of her most popular ones, there can be quite a lot of characters, which usually I try to stay away from because it can get a bit confusing and a bit overwhelming. But that being said, I did get to grips and learn these characters quite easily. I feel I always will note everything down on my phone. Like, if you look at my notes app, actually documented all of the last books that I've read, mainly so I can recap it and keep hold of it in my brain for when I do these videos, but also when I write my reviews up as well on Goodreads. Just helps to refresh my mind on some pointers that sort of stick out over time. And I feel when I am reading, it helps sort of solidify what I'm reading. I have a very poor memory for books, so that's why my book reviews are not the most in-depth as sort of some other book reviewers, because my memory simply does not hold on to these aspects. Said, obviously, I mean, you're probably aware of the story of the death on the Nile, but so the main character is Lynette, and she ends up marrying her best friend's fiance. So there's a bit of scandal involved, and so Lynette and her husband go away on their honeymoon to Egypt, and they obviously get together with all these other people on the boat, and one of them being her best friend, who she has stolen her fiance from. And they're sort of paranoid about, you know, her. She keeps following them, and obviously at some point there becomes a murder. I won't say who gets murdered. It is quite late on in the book, I would say. It's not an immediate murder, and it's not the only murder. So I will leave it at that, but this just really kept me gripped throughout, which it's Agatha Christie, so of course it's going to do. And I then watched the most recent Death on the Nile film, the one with Gal Gadot, and it was good. I wouldn't say it was as good as the book. There were lots of differences I felt between the characters and the plot line. It's a very star-studded cast, I must say, and it is a good film. So if you don't want to read the book, definitely would recommend the film. But for me, it was slightly too different from the book, and I get that because they had to obviously condense things, make things simpler for film purposes, so I get that. And then the final book that I want to share with you is Murder, She Wrote, Aloha Betrayed. And like I previously said, I don't usually read sort of warm setting murder mysteries. I don't know, I would much rather gravitate to the cold ones and the cozy ones. Where are you wanting to go? Say hello. Where are you going? This is slightly like that last one. I tried to push myself to read it. I've never read anything set in Hawaii. The only thing I really know about Hawaii is what I've probably seen on Blue Hawaii with Elvis and Disney Aulani Resort. That's probably all I am sort of culturally aware of the island. And so what I also didn't realise when I got this off Vinted was that this is large print. So I was opening it up and I'm going, whoa, that is big. And yeah, it was interesting to try and read it. So this book follows Jessica, and if you don't know, these are obviously based off of the TV show Murder, She Wrote, but completely new stories. You don't have to read them in order, which is great. But this one follows Jessica as she gets invited by the police in Hawaii to go and help them to see how the community and the police force can work together to help solve crimes on the island. And so while she's there, Jessica befriends this teacher, and she's one of those botanists. She's interested in flowers and stuff, called Marla, and she has sort of a quick sort of meeting like over coffee with her, and then Marla ends up being found dead. They think she's fallen over a cliff, and obviously Jessica and her ex-detective friend do not think that that is maybe the case. they have their suspicions immediately, and we sort of follow Jessica as she gets to know not only the island and the people, but also try and solve this murder. I will probably do a separate book review on this. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's really nice to have sort of these individual book reviews on the more sort of non-popular, obscure books, because those are the ones that I always try and look for book reviews for. And like I said, this is my first taste of learning about the state of Hawaii, and so yeah, I'll be interested to share my thoughts more about this. So you'll probably see this outfit repeated. But that is all that I've got to show you. I might do a cheeky little book haul. I know in my last book haul video I was like, not gonna buy any more books except for X, Y and Z, and yes, that is the case. I've had a few books come in that I had kept in my stackery, which is my American locker, for quite some time, that I was just waiting to come, and I have been pretty much only buying books from Vinted when I have a little bit of extra money come through on there, just so I don't feel quite as bad, you know, spending money on books. So I will probably do a little book haul video as well after this for you. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you would pick up any of these books, what you might pick up based on this video, and let me know what you're reading at the moment, because I'm always on the lookout for recommendations. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.